All right, today's video tutorial is going to be on rate of change from a table, which is the constant rate of change from a table, which is the same thing as the slope from a graph. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Here you are presented with the graph, and you want to figure out the rate of change. And the rate of change is going to be the same thing. You're going to use the formula, the change in y divided by the change in x. Okay? And so basically what you do is you see what the change in y is. So actually, let me move this over here to the side. And what you do is you want to figure out how much this y change. So we're going to go from this, from negative 11 to negative 4. What is happening to y? Well, it is decreasing. So that's going to be a negative change. And it's decreasing by 3. And so your change in y is going to be negative 3. Now you want to figure out the corresponding change in x. Because you're going from this point to this point, you want to see the corresponding point from the change from the corresponding x values. So let's figure out the change in x. Well, from negative 7 to negative 8, what is happening to x? Is it increasing or decreasing? It is decreasing, so it's going to be a negative change. And how much is it decreasing? By 1. And so the change in x is going to be negative 1. And then what you do is you can really see from here to here, it's also decreasing by 3 and decreasing by 3. And so since it's a constant rate of change, all you have to do is simplify. Simplify your fraction. A negative divided by a negative is a positive, and 3 divided by 1 is 3. And so your rate of change for this table is going to be positive 3. Now I want to show you guys something quickly that it really does not matter which 2 points you choose. So I'm going to go ahead and erase this. And I'm going to leave this up here. But I'm going to show you down here, and I'll use the color dark blue. What if I go the change in y divided by the change in x? What if I go from negative 11 to negative 20? Well, what is happening to the change in y? Well, the change in y is going to be, it's decreasing again. And by how much? Well, negative 11 to negative 20 is 9. So the change in y is going to be negative 9. Let's figure out the corresponding change in x. Because you're going from this y value, you want to start with this x value right here. And you're going to go to the corresponding y value. Well, what is happening to x? Is it decreasing or increasing? Well, it's also decreasing. And so that's going to be a negative. And how much is it decreasing by? 3. Because negative 7 and negative 10 is decreasing by 3. And so you end up with a change of y of negative 9 and a change of x of negative 3. And when you simplify it, you still end up with the same rate of change because it's constant. And that is a very important concept to understand when it comes to this. All right, let's do the next one, number 2. Sometimes your tables are going to go sideways. Well, you do the same thing. You want to figure out the rate of change for this table, and you're going to write the formula down. The change in y divided by the change in x. And you figure out the change in y first. So what is happening to y? When we go from 16 to 12, it is decreasing. So that's going to be a negative. How much is it decreasing by? 4. So your change in y is going to be negative 4. Now let's figure out the corresponding change in x. And again, because you're going from this point to this point, you need to make sure you go from this point to this point because that's the corresponding x values. So what is happening to x when you go from 18 to 28? Well, it is increasing. So that's going to be a positive change. How much is decreasing by? 10. And so your change in x is positive 10. And you can see going this way, it's for the ones I gave you guys today, it's going to be the same, positive 10, positive 10. And then you simplify. Negative 4 divided by positive 10, well, you simplify your fraction. So it's going to be a negative rate of change. And you can divide by 2, so you end up with negative 2/5. So your rate of change for this table is 2/5. So that means every time x increases by 2, y decreases by 5, because I put the negative at the bottom, or every time y decreases by 2, x increases by 5. Let's try number 3. Now you have to be careful though, before we go to number 3. When it comes to the vertical tables, a lot of kids just do the x divided by y. No, it's because you see it on top of each other. It is the change in y over the change in x. Just like in 7th grade with the constant proportionality, it was y divided by x. All right, let's go to number 3. Again, you want to figure out the rate of change. So let's figure out the change in y divided by the change in x. Now the lines I give you guys are linear, so it's going to have a constant rate of change. So you can actually pick any points. I'm going to try something different. I'm going to go from this value to this value. So from negative 20 to negative 28, what is the amount of change of y? First of all, is it increasing or decreasing? Well, from negative 20 to negative 28 is decreasing, and it's decreasing by 8. So my change in y is negative 8. Let's go ahead and figure out the corresponding change in x's. Since we started off with this value right here, we need to use the x value here to go to this corresponding x value. So let's go wrong. We're going to go from 19 to 7. Is that increasing or decreasing? Well, that's going to be decreasing. And how much is it decreasing by? Well, 19 to 7, that looks like it's a decrease of 12. And so your corresponding change of x is negative 12. And then you simplify. Negative divided by negative is a positive, so it's going to be a positive. 8/12, it's a fraction. You simplify, and you end up with the rate of change of negative. We can divide both by 4. That's going to be actually positive 3, excuse me. Oops, sorry. It's going to be 2, and then 2/3. A rate of change of 2/3. 2 times 4 is 8, 3 times 4 is 12. And that's how you figure out the rate of change from a table. And again, you can choose any points, but just make sure you choose the corresponding x and y values. The next thing I'm going to show you guys is how to figure out the rate of change from a graph. And this rate of change is called the slope. Now, this one's going to be a little bit difficult if you don't have the handout. So I'm going to write down what you need to write down on the side. First of all, what is the slope? Well, the slope is the rate of change of a linear graph, which is the same thing as the rate of change from a table, but just a different view. So what you're going to do is to figure out the slope, you're going to write down slope, and the slope we write it as m. So the slope is equal to m, which is French for the word monter, which means to climb. And so the slope is the same thing as the rise over the run. And you don't know this, but the rise is the change in y, and the run is the change in x. But the way to figure out the rise means up and down. So what you do here, and this is going to be a little bit tricky with distant learning and not having the actual handout, but I give you 2 points. Here are my 2 points from this point to this point, and I'm going to erase that. And so what you want to figure out is figure out the change in y. And if you recall, the y value represents up and down, and the x value represents left and right. And so the y is up and down, that's why we call it the rise, up and down. The x represents the run, and you run sideways, so that's left and right. And so what you do is you figure out the rise, and you make what are called slope triangles. Now, it doesn't matter which point you choose to go to first, but I'm going to go ahead, and I'm going to come from this point. Let me make that a little bit thicker. Let's try this. I'm going to come from this point to the point down here. And so if you go this way and you count how much does it change, well, you're going down. You start off and you're going to go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And because you're going down 5, it's going to be a negative rise because you're going down. And so that rise is going to be negative 5. And so you can count it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now you're going to go to the right. And maybe I should use a different color. You're going to go to the right. That thick line did not work out. And so since you're going to the right, that's going to be a positive run. And how much do you go? Well, you just count 1, 2, 3, 4. And so you went to the right 4. So that's going to be a run of positive 4. Oops, I forgot to write my rate of change of negative 5. And so you're going down 5 and to the right 4. The rise is down, so it's negative, and the run is positive because you're going to the right, and it's 4. And then what you do is you simplify. And you cannot simplify that, so that ends up being a rate of change of negative 5/4. Now, if I go the other way, I can show you. And I'll do this in a different color. If you do, I don't want to do this. What if you went up? Well, if you go up first instead of going down, it's going to be positive. And how much are you going up? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to get to that point. So the run would be positive 5 in that case. And then you're going to go left. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oops. 1, 2, 3, 4. And since you're going to the left, that's going to be a negative run. And that's going to be a negative 4. And you still end up with the same slope. Now, if you were to choose another point, let's say I gave you a point up here somewhere and a point down here, you'll still end up with the same slope. It doesn't matter which 2 points because when you simplify, it's a constant rate of change. And that's how you figure out slope of a line. All right, so let's go ahead to do the next one, number 5. Oh, another thing I forgot to tell you guys is you can already tell. Let me go ahead and erase this stuff. You can tell by looking at the line ahead of time. If you look at the line ahead of time, you'll see that the line goes downwards. And if the line goes down, that's going to mean a negative slope. All right, so down is negative. And on the opposite way, up has a P, is positive. It's going to have a positive slope. So always go back and check. My slope here was negative. My line was going down. It should have a negative slope. And that is correct. All right. Here's number 5. I gave you 2 points, so you use the points. You're going to figure out the rate of change, which is called the slope. So I'm going to write the slope equals m, which equals the rise over run. And this is what you're going to write in your notebooks. And so let's figure out the rise. I gave you the 2 points. It doesn't matter which one you start at. I'm going to start off at, I'm going to go downward just to show you guys. You can already see that the line goes up, so that's going to be a positive slope. So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to go down 1, 2, and so I go down 2. So since I go down 2, I'm going down, so my rise is going to be negative because you're rising downward, it's negative. And so that's going to be a negative 2 slope. And then you're going to run to the left. So let me run to the left, 1, 2, 3. And so I went to the left 3. And because I go to the left 3, going to the left is negative. And I went to the left 3, so my run is negative 3. And so then you simplify. You have a negative divided by negative, that's going to be positive. And so in this case, your slope is positive 2/3. And really what that means is, and I don't want to draw this, but if you go up 2, 1, 2, because to the right 3, up 2, to the right 3, up 2, to the right 3, up 2, to the right 3, you're still going to end up on this line no matter how far it goes up. Or if you go down 2, down to the left 3, down 2 to the left 3, down 2 to the left 3, and you still end up on that line because it's a constant rate of change. And so when you do notes in virtual learning, you're going to have to write it like this and just use the computer, and you won't be able to do your slope triangle. But just be careful. Oh, by the way, let's double check. This line is going upwards, so our slope should be positive, and our slope is positive, so that means we got at least the correct sign. All right, here's number 6. Let's make a prediction. This line is going downward, so our slope should be negative. So let's go ahead and write what we need to do. The slope, which is equal to the m, which is equal to the rise over the run, which is the rise divided by run. And let's figure out the rise. Again, it doesn't matter which point you choose to start with. I give you 2. So I'm going to go from this point to this point. And so I'm going down. That's going to be a negative rise. And how much do you go down? 1, 2, 3, 4. And so that's going to be a rise of negative 4. Then I'm going to go to the right. And I'm going to run. How much do I run? 1, 2. You count how much you move. And you go to the right 2. And so because you go to the right 2, that should be positive. And I forgot to put the signs. That's negative 4. And then you simplify. Negative 4 halves. Well, that's the same thing, a negative divided by a positive negative. And if you divide each numerator denominator by 2, you end up with 2 ones, or you can just divide 4 by 2. And so you end up with the slope of negative 2, which is the same thing as having a rise of negative 2 and a run of positive 1. Okay? But we simplify it this way. And that's how you figure out the rate of change from a graph and the rate of change from a table. If you guys have any questions, you guys can ask me. Have a good day.